Good Friday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to Real Talk with Keith Smith. Thank you kindly for joining us. A pleasure to connect with you guys through the I Love CVille Network, a show presented by Yes Realty Partners. Find them online, Yes Realty Partners. You will be impressed by Keith Smith. You will be dazzled by Yonna Smith and the team members at YRP. Today's show is going to be dynamite. You, the viewer and listener, can participate in the discussion on a show that we've called Dealer's Choice. You guys dictate the pace and tempo. Today's guest is Neil Williamson, an all-around A-plus guy. He is the president of the Free Enterprise Forum. We've dubbed him the king of content. He offers clarity on so many topics that matter in this community. Much of the news cycle, in fact, originates at the Free Enterprise Forum. Judah Wickower is our director. If we can go to the studio camera and welcome two sharply dressed individuals. And Keith, we would be remiss not to congratulate Sir Neil Williamson on a fantastic wedding that just transpired.
Congratulations on the wedding. It's a great feeling to have them all out. The checkbook's a little lighter, right? But it's a great feeling to get them all out.
Weddings are fabulous celebrations of friends, family, and celebrations of what is to come.
I love it. I love it. Can you give us a snapshot on how it went?
Sure. It was a glorious day, brilliant sunshine, and because of some scheduling issues, the flower females, or whatever you properly call
Bridesmaids?
No, the bridesmaids went down the
Flower
aisle.
girls?
And the flower girls that came down right before the bride were the two surviving grandmothers, which was just very special.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
It was very special.
Very cool.
How cool is that? That's a unique thing, man.
It was very unique, and my mother-in-law hammed it up pretty good.
The groom, his last scion, an offensive lineman at the College of William and Mary, played for the Tribe, a talented individual. How is the bride and groom as we speak?
Both are gainfully employed. I love to say those words, and living
and not in the basement,
and living in a great starter home in Greene County.
Fantastic! I love it. So congratulate Neil Williamson when you see him. Keith Smith, my friend, you got a hot topic on the brain.
Yeah, well, really. I just wanted to pick back up. There was some chatter we started on Wednesday and in the news cycle about this project that's coming up on I believe it's East High, right? On East High Street along the river, and there was some conversation about floodplains and so forth and so on. And I kind of I did some research and wanted to break it down and definitely let Neil dive in because he's very much so up to speed on this. So this particular parcel was zoned back in the early 70s. The application is by right. But what happened about a year and a half ago, the developer, which actually is a company by the name of Seven Development that is doing it. It's not Wood. It's a different firm that's actually doing the development process or the site plan process. So there's a 100-year floodplain, and there's this thing called the floodway line, and that's the line that matters. And about a year ago, the developer went ahead and petitioned FEMA, and we can talk about the process later, but petition FEMA to move that line. So make a very long story short, the floodplain map has been amended to include an area by which they can build this building. You want to jump in?
Sure. The floodway line was moved.
Correct.
On the basis of actual on-the-ground measurements rather than GIS measurements that are kind of all over the board. So the developer took the risk and spent the money to have the survey done, not knowing what the results would be. And when the results came back, they came back in a positive manner. They then had to petition FEMA to have that line moved. Such petitions take between 6 and 8 weeks to go through. They are relatively standard. I've been aware of several of them, especially around Lake Anna. And there have been many out in Fluvanna that I'm aware of. And I think, Keith, you may have been associated with some of them.
I have.
But the reality is the original FEMA maps, which, don't get me wrong, FEMA is a great organization. They were a broad brush. And when you go down to the granular, you oftentimes are making adjustments, pluses and minuses on lines.
So it's a real estate show. So to put a little bit of a different context to it, it's kind of like looking at your tax assessment and then hiring somebody to come out and do an appraiser. These lines, these floodplain, these way lines are established, off of as the GIS. And I can tell you, as one who's done a little bit of development in their career, I've had these GISs be off anywhere from 2 to 12 feet. It's until you actually spend the money and go on it. And that's ultimately what happened here. So the elevations were different than what the GIS map said and the FEMA map.
We'll take a moment to highlight Mr. Sean Tubbs, friend of the
Please.
program. Sean Tubbs at the Community Engagement Substack at Info CVille at Town Crier Productions. He broke this story, and I'm looking at it right now as a point of reference for the show, on September 27th. Sean got this in the news cycle with a headline called "Plans Filed for 245 Units Along the Rivanna River on Land in Floodplain." Soon thereafter, we started chattering about this on this network. Soon thereafter that, Hall Spencer picks it up in the Charlottesville Daily Progress. We highlight Sean Tubbs because we encourage all the viewers and listeners to support and donate and subscribe and read his content. The man is an institution and follows the news cycle very closely. I will give cliff notes and then pass it to the experts, Keith and Neil. 245 apartment units on nearly 7 acres of land near the Rivanna River. That land owned by Wendell Wood, United Land Corporation. 1,400 roughly cars expected to be going along that corridor once this project is finished. The corridor is already extremely busy with traffic. Currently, the neighborhood around the Rivanna River on both sides of High Street are galvanizing and organizing to slow this project down. Some would even say oppose this project. I think that is very safe to say. Council discussed this in their last meeting. Michael Payne, a counselor, mentioned on the record he was surprised that this was happening in the floodplain. We had numerous lobbying groups speak about this, including Peter Krebs of the Piedmont Environmental Council. Surprising to me, and I love Peter, he comes on the show all the time, he's a great guy. PEC spoke out in favor of this project. Peter Krebs spoke out in favor of this project. Gentlemen, that's the broad strokes here. You guys are the experts. Where would you like to continue?
Well, I would like to say that the Free Enterprise Forum doesn't take positions on projects, so we're not in favor or against this project. In terms of a policy, if you have a by right build anywhere, you have to meet site plan regulations, but opposing something that is available by right is a fool's errand. If you are allowed by law, by right, to build something and you can do it within the regulations, you have every legal right to do so. That's true of any by right development.
So I sat next to Councilor Payne yesterday at the Planning District Commission, so I did not have an opportunity to have this discussion with them. So the term we should be using is the property is outside the floodway line, not the floodplain line, because people get confused or without the specific differences on it. So technically the building site is outside of the floodway line, which is outside of the 100-year floodplain. And I'm familiar with this because we did this in Charlottesville with the with the land trust, same situation, Habitat and ourselves along Nassau Street, amended the floodway line, brought in dirt, brought up the pads up above this way line, got building permits built, got COs, and moved on. I'm simplifying it a little bit here. But the reality of it is, to Neil's point, it's by right. They could potentially slow the process down, and I'm sure that, do you know if that's in the ARB lane?
I don't believe it is.
Yeah, so there's no architectural review requirements. So it's a pretty simple set of boxes to check. It'll take time. Probably a year to go through it, but I'm not really sure there's anything that quote unquote can stop it.
Well,
would you agree?
I do agree, provided they can meet the setbacks and all the other regulations that exist. It's important to recognize that when people say, oh, well, you aren't going to live in a floodplain. 41 million Americans live in a flood zone. Now, there are 4 types of flood zones, and one's more intense than the other. And then you have the floodway, and we really still have people living in floodways that are grandfathered, but until they get blown away. Now,
I mean, what should we highlight? New Orleans?
well, you
Can we highlight that city?
You can highlight Florida.
Yeah.
where
I mean, good Lord. It's everywhere.
But FEMA describes the floodplain as any area with a 1% or greater chance of receiving flood damage over any given year. And so, but FEMA's regulations, when you look at a study, they did a study over a 20-year period, they have avoided $32 billion in damage. And each year, U.S. spends $54 billion because of natural disasters, and the federal spending averages $17 billion. So it's important to get this right, and it's important to build things right and where they belong, and not build them where they don't. In this case, I think the documentation has been made. They can be built here, and think about where this is. You're right along a transit stop. You can walk to employment. What is this whole live, work, and play? I'm just back from Greenville, South Carolina. They have a vibrant riverfront. You know, San Antonio has the same idea. We have this river that runs through us, and we turn our back to it. Should we be embracing that? What opportunities lie there? What could we do in those floodway areas that would work? For instance, when you look at the soccer fields that are up on North 29, Polo Grounds Road, that's one of the few times our community actually gets to interact with the river. If you're not, jumping in a kayak down in Scottsville, it is a lovely space, and it floods. What a great use for square fields, because it then recedes and they're available for that use. So I think it's important to recognize these FEMA regulations have a basis in fact, and amending such regulations is not getting around them. It is just honing in the granularity of the facts.
So what's the beef?
I don't know what the beef is, but just for a second, to add to that, what is I think the important takeaway. So if you're looking at a piece of property or something like that to build on, and if it's in the floodplain, there is a methodology to look at that and walk yourself through it. And I'll tell you, I've done it dozens and dozens of times, and there's not a single time I've looked at it that the floodplain was off by multiple feet, right? So what happens here is this is how this is built. People go and take a look at it. The floodplain maps get better because they're actual data going back and forth, and it just kind of connects from here to there. As far as the beef is concerned,
We're talking traffic and quality of life. That's the beef, right?
We're talking traffic, density, educational requirements. It's everything that comes out with any development.
So it's interesting, yesterday at the Planning District Commission, we spent a very long time talking about these very things and talking about how do you communicate these issues to elected officials and to the public. It was actually a really great roundtable discussion, but to Neil's point, that's what it is. But I wanted to focus on the facts, right? And the facts are, it's zoned, the floodway line has been moved, there's very little that could happen to go ahead unless, to Neil's point, the building that they're looking to put is outside of building setbacks or something. And trust me, the folks that are working on this, I know them, they're super sharp. They will put everything in, and eventually a permit will be issued. And unless the market takes a dive on apartments, which I don't think
We don't think that's going to happen.
That's going to happen, it will get built.
Well, I mean, think about it. Neil, I'll pass it to you. Think about this. Shimp Engineering is involved. You're talking the best of the best here. I mean, and just about, you follow this more closely than I do, both you guys, but I follow it pretty darn closely. Shimp Engineering is involved in just about everything. I mean, this guy does it right.
Justin keeps very busy. He brings innovative projects to
Constantly.
commission. Some of those innovative projects push the envelope, and some of them get denied because of that. He has several projects that are working in the floodplain with creative ways to address them. And I appreciate that because it's making land in Albemarle County in the development area developable.
Exactly.
So
That's a great point.
I know Justin very well personally. I've started using him as my engineer right out of college. Actually spoke to him on the way.
You out of college or him out of college?
I never went to school. You should know.
And one of his team members,
is Kelsey Schlein.
who you've known from knee high, right?
I've known since zero.
Yeah.
Right? Known from zero.
And she
But she
helped
doesn't
us
like when I say that, but yeah.
She helped us with the telethon, and she was a rock star.
So Kelsey's a rock star.
Yeah.
Thank God that he hired Kelsey because, needed somebody with a little bit better temperament to talk in public meetings. But I had a conversation with this morning about this because I wanted to make sure I had the facts on it. And what I'm reporting in is the facts. And so it's going to get built. To Neil's comment, you're 100% right. I've been involved with projects with them for myself. We'll go outside of the box, right? The rules are the rules, right? We'll stay within them, but, coming up with creative solutions. And that's what the market does, right? The market will do that,
When there's no other option available.
When there's no other option available. And
Joe Friday, just the facts, ma'am. Nothing but the facts. There's Keith Smith right there. I beat Neil Williamson to the first pop culture reference. I was trying mightily because he's not only the king of content, he's the king of pop culture. My wife literally told me over bagels this morning, I like when Neil comes on. He often makes me laugh with his pop culture references. So you have a lot to live up to here, Neil. We haven't heard one yet. I want to highlight this for you guys. And this is reading directly from Sean Tubbs, Community Engagement Substack. Support this man.
If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be talking about it.
Exactly right. The 3 buildings, there would be 3 apartment buildings, 245 units. The 3 buildings would each have a height of 4 stories and a total footprint of 322,000 square feet. Each would be constructed on fill to elevate the foundation above the current topography out of the floodplain. Building A would have 45 units and the foundation would be at 334 feet above sea level. Building B would have 60 units and be above 335 feet. Building C would have 140 units and also would be 335 feet above. So they're building up.
Yeah.
A good example of this to give imagery is maybe some of the homes you see in the Outer Banks, where they build up, right?
Sure.
Except this isn't on stilts.
Oh, not stilts, but it'd be on
building the ground up.
So
Yeah.
you amend the earth. You
amend the earth, and then you file an amendment, which is amendment-F for fill. And the idea there is to change the floodplain and bring these things out. It is a engineered solution. The other thing to note is when you're building up, the other thing about the river is it's depressed, so that massing doesn't feel as tall because when you're on High Street, the river's below you. So a 4-story building looks like a 2-story building from High Street.
You're looking down at it.
That's great. Okay, so he said it better than I would. I would imagine, and I'm just spitballing here, that if you build cool apartments, which these would be cool, they'd be new, and they have a view of the water, that people would want to live there, especially when you're in walking distance of the downtown mall. What do you got? CFA right there, literally across the street.
Sure.
Pantops has got multiple points of transit right there. You can run the Rivanna Trail.
You can walk
right
to
there.
the downtown mall.
You can walk the mall. This could be one of the coolest projects ever.
Yeah.
And there is currently a smart scale project that's being considered for a pedestrian bike bridge over the Rivanna River, connecting that side of the river to the other side of the river.
That's right.
Yeah, but is that what side of 250 is that they're proposing that? Because it was originally going to be a little closer to downtown Park. Is that now further down the river?
It's before Freebridge, I believe.
And so it's on the lower side. It's on the
Yeah.
downstream side. That's what I thought. Yeah. So look, the reality of it is, some people might be upset about it, but I, based on my research and taking a deep dive into it, really all you needed to do was read Sean's reporting, and it answered the floodplain. Put a little bit more technical part to it, so people think you just don't dump dirt there. There's a whole process there. You have to have compaction. It's tested on it. So, you just don't dump dirt and build a house on top.
I'm getting challenged. Jonathan Bonnet on the feed right now. What you guys are missing is the High Street corridor right now is already safe for our families. Try walking your kids to school. They're going to add construction, development, and when this project is finished, 1,500 or more cars will be coming through here. We don't even have sidewalks. You're missing these points, gentlemen. Jonathan, we respect that comment.
I don't think we're missing them at all. I think what we're talking about is, can they do this with the property or not? Right.
And to be fair, Jonathan, since 1972, this property has been zoned for this level of development. It has not occurred. Thus, the city has not put the money into the infrastructure to support the zoning. That's a good, logical decision when you don't have people to walk those sidewalks. Now, the pushback is the city is responsible for the infrastructure outside of the development. And the city needs to own up to the challenges. How many studies have we seen of this area as well as other areas that then just sit on the shelf? I am amazed at where we are in terms of city infrastructure, and I think that's a very fair challenge to not necessarily this development, but to city government to where are our sidewalks?
You have Jeff Stiles watching now, an architect and principal of, Jeff, is it Sunbiosi PLC in Charlottesville? I'm sorry if I messed up the name of the business. We appreciate you watching. Comments coming in fast and furious here.
Let me jump in for a moment here.
It's a hot topic.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
but to take a different approach, maybe. This would be the opportunity to get involved in the zoning rewrites now. This is not going to impact this project, so I'm talking something a little bit further down.
Okay, thank you
the
for
road.
saying that. Yeah,
Right. I'm not talking about this project. This project
it's going to happen.
It's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So instead of fighting this project, I think getting involved in this zoning rewrite, because there's two sides to this zoning process, right? Or this construction of this. And Neil, jump in when I go off base. There's a zoning part of it, and then there's a subdivision part of it, right? Or the development part of it, the rules that go along with it. That is also an ordinance process through that. So these two things are being written concurrently. So if we're worried about, just assume we're worried about traffic, right? So they could possibly, in the new zoning rewrites, in the subdivision or in the development code rewrite on it, say, look, if you're on this corridor, parking goes to zero, right? This is what we've been talking about forever, right? Right now, the way they're going to operate underneath that, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they have to have 1.5 cars per unit.
1.5
Spaces.
I
Yeah.
apologize. Spaces, yeah. Which
makes it very expensive.
it makes it expensive. So if the zoning ordinance or the development ordinance said zero, then they but folks then need to use mass transit.
Or park on the neighborhood streets and upset Jonathan even further.
Yeah.
Where do we see that very notably? We saw that in Belmont.
Right,
Yeah.
but I just came from a place that built a minor league baseball stadium
Center
in Greenville. And,
Greenville's awesome, isn't it?
And they had no parking associated with it. The area churches around this warehouse district where they put this were upset at the beginning.
Until they got the money.
In the end, they ended up parking cars in their lots, and it became a revenue source. So there are ways to work it out. And they actually mandated 30 apartments in the stadium development. Now, everything around the stadium is developing with additional residential and limited parking requirements because they have a very vibrant transit system. So I think it's important to recognize all things come at a time. This property hasn't been developed because it couldn't be developed, and it's expensive to develop. And the reason it's being developed is because there's demand that will pay the price to have those challenges met. That the same is true as we look at our regional transit system. When we see the transit work will be when we can step out at the bus stop and not have to look up the app to see which side of 30 minutes to an hour is the next bus coming, but no, the next bus will be here in 8 minutes, one way or another.
So my comment to the viewers and listeners that are concerned about that, now is the time to get involved, right? This project is if you're concerned about what this project's going to do, it's frankly too late, right? It's, the project may be slowed down a little bit.
Slow down how?
Well, staff can take a little bit longer. There's, as Neil will say in a minute, they're required to do it within 90 days, but if you want to jump in and tackle that. But it could be, believe me, when we did the project in Nassau Street, we did exactly the same thing with Habitat. And it took me a year to get the permit to go vertical. And it was, you submit it, 90 days, they come back with more questions. They get another 90 days, they come back with more questions. You get another 90 days, but eventually you will get there and get it done. But again, get engaged. Please engage with the city rewrite of its zoning ordinances. I got a mustache on.
You do have a mustache on the line. We haven't forgotten either.
No.
Scott
he got
Williams.
mad at me the other day.
Scott Williams, the former educator watching the program right now. This comment is a follow-up from Jonathan. He's passionate right now. He goes, my family lives past Riverside down Hazel. Try walking your child in a stroller down Hazel from High Street to the downtown mall. It's dangerous.
Without doubt.
If the city pursues something like this, they're risking safety with our families. Neil has emphasized this, and Jonathan, we empathize and we sympathize here, but the road scenario is not Wendell Wood or the seven development LLCs. Is priority the right word?
No, it's not. It's not an issue they can challenge.
Exactly.
Dictate.
Explain that.
The idea of community development is that you plan for development. I know it sounds crazy, but you grow where you want to grow, and you dedicate infrastructure, limited infrastructure dollars, to where you want to be. I actually sympathize even more when you have these expanded walking school bus zones. I mean, these are kids on their way to school having to walk in the street. It seems completely wrong to me. That being said, that's where we are today.
Yeah, High Street's a mess.
I respect that.
I'm a cyclist, and I will not go on High Street.
I've said on this show so
will
many
not go on
times
High
that
Street.
High Street is the most underachieving corridor in the city of Charlottesville.
It
was High Street, or what was the other one we said? I think it was Cherry and the Fifeville corridor.
Yeah.
As underachieving, almost neglected.
So when I come in from Fluvanna County to here, I have two options. I can come down 250, I can go 53. I do not come down 250 because I don't want to make a left on East High Street. It's just a pain in you know what.
People are cutting through, and this has been in the news cycle of late as well, including a fantastic photo with friend of the program, Mayor Lloyd Snook, with a polo tucked into his shorts, white socks pulled up, and white tennis shoes. He was at Jack and Jill's as people were cutting through Shortcut. I think Hall Spencer himself even took that photo. He got a photo credit in the Daily Progress.
Yes.
You saw that picture?
I did.
Yeah.
I want to know why he didn't have his Birkenstocks.
I thought
That's it.
Hall, Mayor Snook doesn't wear the Birkenstocks.
I know.
That's Mr. Bill Tucker.
That's Mr. Tucker.
The reality is that intersection is challenged.
So challenged.
So
So
challenged.
let's talk about how we're going to help fixing that, right? So look, the reality of it is based on the buy right, based on everything they've done, they can slow down, but this is going to get built, right? And this is going to happen. They did on River Road on the opposite side of 250. There's some apartment. There's, by the way, another project that nobody's talking about that's across the way from that. That's on the river also. I believe it's over by the old junkyard over on the opposite side. I believe, if I got my location.
Who's the owner of that?
It's the same folks that are doing it. Seven developments doing that too.
But the thing to recognize is that in Albemarle County, after the developer builds the internal roads, the roads are owned by VDOT. In Charlottesville, the roads are owned by the city. You have a public works division that takes care of your roads and dictates design changes.
So go to city council meetings, reach out to the thing and say, look, we need to improve this East High Street. I mean, and whatever that means, right? Because like Neil was saying, if it was in Albemarle County, you have to go through this whole, help me out. The
Smart scale.
Smart scale, thank you. The smart scale process. In the city of Charlottesville, it's the city councilors that make this decision ultimately because they're the ones that are going to dedicate dollars to it. Am I saying that correctly?
You are saying that correctly, and it's limited dollars. And so when you have limited dollars and you have matching funds often from VDOT for things, but they're limited dollars and you have to match, there are competing interests. And I hate to say this, but each neighborhood has to have a voice in order to compete for those limited dollars.
So what are you saying? You want some community engagement? What are they called? The CACs? You want to see more CACs? Is that what
in the city, they're neighborhood associations
Okay.
that the neighborhood associations I feel much more strongly about are a positive because they were grassroots organizations that came up out of their own not being created by the county.
I can tell you.
By the way,
Community advisory committees?
if you've attended the Rivanna Advisory Committee meeting in the last 6 months, oh, I'm sorry, everyone quit.
That's right. Everyone quit.
So
that's so true. Everyone quit.
you've got to work a pop reference
I
into something.
love Neil Williamson so much.
But these community neighborhoods are really good because, as part of the Planning District Commission, we're doing these small area plans and they're very well organized and able to provide information. The point is, this project is by right. It was zoned. It's not a rezoning, right? If it was a rezoning, then this becomes a whole different set of conversations where then the city, through discussions, right, because we can't call them proffers anymore, but through discussions will help say, hey, can you contribute X amount of dollars? But this is to Neil's point. It's been sitting there for since 72, and now the market said, let's do it. And I'm super sympathetic to the neighbors and the folks that have to deal with this.
Stacy Reed, question for Neil and Keith. She says, Keith, you're in the development world. How will this project impact traffic flow during the process of the development? How will the trucks and the heavy equipment go to build this? And what do we do about maneuvering our children and our families around the area?
It's going to be a mess.
Like how?
Was that too direct?
No, I mean,
It's going to be a mess because
it's so narrow already.
Yeah, absolutely.
How would they come in and out is the question she's
they're not
asking.
coming along the river.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Right, so they're going on East High Street.
Is that,
I mean, it's
working that out is going to be an important part, but regardless how you do it, it will impact traffic in the short term. I think the second half of that question is probably even more impactful.
I'm going to push back on the short term.
He's right about the second half of the question, though.
Well, I want to push back on the short term a little bit. This is not short term.
Three buildings.
This is a year and a half to 2 years of.
Oh, I was thinking 5 years is short term in my world.
Got it.
I mean, 5 years is short term. I understand there are people that will move in
Well,
and out of the
a guy
area
who's
by
65 years is a long time, but that's okay.
Well, the second half is how does it impact the future when you have an additional 1,400 car trips a day, which is significant. Well, there are solutions out there that can be done, but it will require the city and property owners to work together. Perhaps the city may have to buy some right-of-way to create a traffic circle. What would a traffic circle look like there at High Street, right there by Jack and Jill?
That'd be a mess.
It would be a mess, but would it be improve it or make it worse? Make it better.
Interestingly,
make it better or worse.
Well, I'm a huge.
You know who's in the catbird seat right now? The Cosner family.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
The Cosner family, who owns much of East High Street. Kim Cosner's running it for her father now. She's a realtor.
Yeah.
They're in the catbird seat. You know who else is in the catbird seat? Our neighbor Zanice, who owns Jack and Jill's and the land.
Yeah. Everybody on that side of the street. On the
has
river,
massive leverage.
Yeah, has massive. But to Neil's point, right? If somebody really wants to do something about this, and this is all about having money, right? Somebody can start buying up all that property, or the city can start buying up all that property and redo. So how are you going to rebuild East High Street? It's the right-of-ways are super narrow, right? There's a tremendous amount of utilities all over the place in there. And, your buildings are right up against the road.
And if you want to develop, let's say, a river walk down that way, which would be, it could work. It could work.
Love the river walk.
But if you wanted to, the city would have to start land banking 10 years, 20 years ago. But the city would have to start land banking with a vision.
Well, I can assure you we're a long way from a land bank.
I will tell you that we're a long way from a vision.
Yeah.
We're a long
I mean, look, here's another option.
I
mean, the business folks aren't going to like this. Turn East High Street into a one-way.
Oh, man.
I mean, but you've got only a finite.
How the hell would that work?
I'm just giving a solution. It doesn't say if it's going to make.
Well, why don't we just close it and then there won't be any traffic impact?
So there's but the city could do that though, right?
You got a lot of people watching
Yeah.
here. You're saying turn it into a one-way?
But you could.
How would that work?
You could turn it into one way. I don't know.
So it would only work free bridge to town?
Yeah.
One way?
Well,
how about this from Danielle?
Let me finish the train of thought. So, because cities are doing this. Jurisdictions are doing this. They're turning streets into one way. Then they're doing bike lanes and walk lanes.
But arterials need to carry traffic. High is one of the arterials into the city.
I don't disagree with that.
And so cutting the traffic in half on there by putting it in just one direction is not a solution that I think makes sense.
Got it.
I'm not
saying it makes sense. I'm just saying it's a puzzle.
Daniel Johnson, we live in this area, and we've lived in this area for almost 7 years. This project will turn roads like Hazel and Fairview into the roads of traffic when they were met for neighborhood roads and parking our cars. They will drive massive amounts of traffic in front of our homes with this project during the construction and after the construction being concluded.
So
And that is what those roads were designed as neighborhood roads, but your new urbanists would say the grid pattern that exists in the city is the best pattern because it diffuses the traffic rather than having one road in and run one road out.
well, people are just going to do what I do. It's just what's going to happen. You're going to pick an alternate route, and
That's what she's saying.
That's exactly
Yeah.
what she's saying.
That
She's going to have more cars driving in front of her house.
Yeah.
Absolutely
So
agree.
maybe the one way is not such a genius idea. I'm trying to throw out options to folks.
I still like my gondola system.
Gondolas.
My gondola system over
That's
there.
up in the air.
That's up in the air. Can we-
I don't think that's holding
Look,
water. by
Judith's
the way.
freaking laughing right now on that. That's up in the air. Oh, God.
So is there a way, instead of spending all this money on West Main, right?
They're not spending all the money. They
Okay.
gave the money back.
Yeah.
The VDOT money went back, and they
Yeah.
chose not to spend the money.
Okay.
And so they
Well, let me-
walked away from millions of dollars.
So instead of the brain power on that, can we look at East High from right away to right away and see if there's
I hate to say
Is that the solution that we need to do?
I think they need to look at East High as a proof of performance of potentially what they don't want to ever happen again.
Yeah, well-
and they say, this is what transpired
But
here.
we have-
Let's keep this from happening elsewhere.
we have listeners and viewers that this is impacting their lives.
Hugely.
Absolutely.
Hugely.
So what are their options? What are their solutions? What?
I will tell you what their options are as one who has had things occur where they live. The property owner has rights. You are a property owner. You have rights. And I hate to say it, you can move. It's a very harsh reality.
That's very, very straightforward. Okay,
I'm not so sure of one way, and that is kind of on the same level.
follow-up question to that is, a natural one. How does this impact property values? That's a very straightforward topic right there.
That is a great question.
I think it's twofold, short-term and long-term. I think
Short-term, vulnerable.
short-term, there's some vulnerability, but it's still going to be what the market is doing. Long-term, you're showing additional viability in this area, regardless of the price point that these things come in at. You're showing additional carrying capacity. You'll have additional vibrancy. You've got the rooftops. You may see some of those retail corridors changing to different vendors in those rooftops, and that I can envision it being a net positive in the long term.
Keith?
So I'm probably
Straight, you shoot it straight here.
Yeah,
Shoot
no,
it.
no. There's nothing to add to that. It's
Yeah.
100% right. It's short. I mean, when you're going to have a construction entrance, a temporary construction entrance, where trucks coming in and out of there for a foreseeable period of time, it's going to impact everything.
I'm
Everything.
reminded of a shoe repair place and dry cleaner that was located near one of the metro stops. And while it was being constructed, everyone's like, you're going to do great. You're going to do great. Because if I can live through the construction, yeah, I'll do great. But during the construction, business was horrible.
Larry Howard, Specialty Guitars. He's a realtor. He owns a guitar store with his son on Route 29.
Yeah.
I bought the 2 units on the second floor from him in a seller finance deal. When they did that project on Rio Road, the underpass project, Specialty Guitars, he said his business literally was down 60%.
And what happened on that corridor? This is a great example.
Yep.
The grade separated interchange. There, at the time that was proposed and funded, there were 2 fast food restaurants on that I guess that's the southwest corner. Both of those have closed.
Was that a Hardee's?
There was a Hardee's and a Wendy's.
That's right.
And both of those have closed. They've been replaced with a car dealership. This was supposed to make things more walkable. In the short term, it has not.
Try to ride a bike across that.
The long term, however,
It is insane.
The long term vision for that area includes, a pocket park in the floodplain down by Northridge or the Northern Library, as well as significant changes on the mall site. Well, gee, haven't we had some news about that lately?
Northside Library.
The Northside Library,
Yeah.
but the mall site was supposed to turn into a gridded pattern of streets with mixed use between retail and commercial. Well, now we have Albemarle County, who, by the way, did the study, but in a 20-year lease for public safety, and then you have Home Depot, who I think is in the hardware business, although they're telling me they're going to be running a mall, purchasing the balance of it.
I mean, it's
Is it really a good time to get into the mall business? I'm not so sure that's a good idea.
God, this is also making me nostalgic of the Fry Springs project.
Oh, yeah.
Remember Fry Springs when they shut down that area for the bridge?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
And then all the restaurants there, Atlas Coffee, J.O., who's watching,
Yeah.
Johnny Ornalis, Guadalajara, Dirty Nelly's Wayside, Fry Springs Station. They were like, what the heck is going on? For like 24, I don't know how long it took. I want to say 18 to 24 months.
Yeah.
No one could get to that area. I'm also curious, and this is me talking here, I'm curious to see how this project is going to gentrify High Street. Right now, it's very much how would you characterize the businesses along High Street? You would characterize them as like wholesale providers of the housing supply chain?
Well, which
Charlottesville Glass and Mirror.
Yep.
You
Yep.
got the cleaning company.
Yep.
Okay, it's industrial. Would you characterize it that
You
way?
have a lot of light industrial users.
Yeah.
No. But the other side was a little bit more light industrial, so the upriver side of that. But you're 100% right. But it's for 35 years. It was you had the original Riverside was there, right?
Yep.
Right.
Right.
Still there.
Yep.
Well,
Fabio's.
correct. But
Jack
it was
and
in a
Jill's
different
Tubby's.
That's exactly right. So
Tubby's is serving breakfast.
Tubby's is serving breakfast. That was a hell of a pivot for them, getting some new clients in there for breakfast. So I guess the question is, in the short term and long term, in the long term, perhaps you see the businesses evolve to more foot traffic-based businesses that cater to the apartments and the density, like restaurants.
That's assuming they get past the 5 years of construction coming in and out of there.
But the bigger question is one of vision.
Yeah.
And, when the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were founded, John McKay was their first coach. And I remember this watching NFL Today with Phyllis George, and she's interviewing him, and she says, I understand you have a 5-year plan. He goes, I got a 5-year contract. Of course I've got a 5-year plan. But the idea is, do we have anyone in this community thinking beyond the next election?
Well, that's just politics, brother.
That's a great question.
That's always
Well, I mean,
always
isn't
a
that
frustration.
a byproduct, or maybe that's not the right word? Maybe it's collateral damage of not having a city manager in play.
I think we've had 7 city managers in play.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they take direction from the city council.
They take direction from city council,
Yeah.
but we don't have this community vision. We don't have it.
And so let's spin it back to your Greenville trip, right? Did they stop? They grabbed the vision and moved forward. Talk a little bit about that, how that process. And so we're talking about East High Street, Charlottesville. Is there anything that you learned when you're down there that could be helpful to this conversation?
Sure. There are a bunch of statues of fat, middle-aged white men throughout the town who had the vision and kept getting reelected that helped make the vision happen. And they said point blank, one of the sitting councilors that we met with said, we often have to go against public opinion. And that's fascinating to me. And the mayor has been mayor for 26 years.
Institutional memory.
Institutional memory. They are scheduled to grow, population growth, 40%.
Greenville is awesome.
Greenville is fascinating.
It's vibrant. It's young.
It's young. Boy,
Yeah.
is it young.
Oh, yeah.
Average age is 36.9 years.
Yeah.
My wife and I visited Greenville for a long weekend. Stayed with one of her college best friends, and we were awed by the walkability, the nightlife, the bars, the rooftop. It's vibrant.
It is vibrant, and they didn't start. And one of the big postcard picture now is the bridge, the pedestrian bridge. They took out a highway bridge, put in a pedestrian bridge, and reimagined this city park with falls. They had a river with falls that most of the town didn't know about. And so they reimagined it, and they put a bunch of money, public-private partnerships, everything's got a name on it. It's the Jerry Miller water fountain, but it's the I Love CVille toilet, but they do have lots of public restrooms, by the way, which is a huge...
I noticed those pictures.
Huge deal. It is I firmly believe there's things that we can learn, but we also have to pay attention to the differences. The differences are we don't have 20,000 people working at BMW just outside of town.
Yeah.
We don't have the Michelin plant just outside of town.
Yeah.
We don't have an average an
We
average
do have the
wage.
University of Virginia.
We have the University
They
of
don't
Virginia.
have that.
They don't have that. Clemson's an hour away. Furman's
Right.
8 miles north. But it is, to my way of thinking, lots we can learn from what they've done. But they didn't start with the bridge, or the falls, as they call it.
Ray, go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead. They started with the idea of fixing downtown. And I said, well, was there any pushback? They said, nobody was downtown. Everybody, only people you'd find there were prostitutes and drug dealers. So it was really easy to get things through.
Ray Cadell.
I just going to leave that alone.
Ray Cadell, watching the program, he says, "Gentlemen, I'm traveling with the band right now. We're listening. We're outside Philadelphia. We're heading to Knoxville tomorrow. And it's very nice to be able to use these programs to keep in touch with what's happening in the community. I just wanted to say thank you to you guys."
Well, those are great. Thank you for listening. But I was in Philly in July, and there's a 10-block center called the City Center. And that has what I guess we call here is a BID, a Business Improvement District, but it's a super tax. And they pay, and they have big people like Comcast paying. And you walk around and you see ambassadors everywhere. One of the things I saw in Greenville, I saw more public works employees than I did homeless. Now, they still had homelessness, but they spend a ton of money.
No SCC.
No
rules. You can go ahead and say it.
Good. But on keeping that safe, clean, and open. And if you believe Mayor Knox White, they did it for the residents. The other thing he believes strongly is having residential downtown is critical to the success of downtown.
I'm not opposed to downtown becoming a BID, Business Improvement District. I would even pony up and open the wallet to contribute, just putting that out there in the news cycle.
Ray Cadell, thank you for watching. Safe travels, my friend.
Bill
Or listening.
McChesney, Wild Bill, has comments. Save 10 minutes. He's talking about the precarious nature of traffic along Free Bridge and along High Street. And his comments are, there are multiple ones here that I'm going to read. He said, when driving the Colonial Shuttle, I would take Route 29 South and I-64 back to 250, exit 124 in order to pick up a customer on Pantops. This saved at least 20 minutes. He said Free Bridge East is a cluster every single day from 3:30 to 6 p.m. He also says pretty much that this is going to be a disaster. The Colonial Shuttle means, I would imagine, Colonial Auto when he was driving the shuttle for them.
Yeah, I think that is a great analysis from boots on the ground.
Yeah. I mean, he's a driver.
Yeah, so I keep on going back to, gentlemen, okay, it's going to happen. What are we going to do to help the concern? What options do we have to help the folks all of us that are concerned about this? What's on the table? Is it a PPEA, right? Is it a partner? Does the city or the folks that are opposing this say, you know what, let's pick up the phone, call the developer and say, look, we know we can't stop you. Let's work together. Is there something the developer can do to help the community along? I don't know. I'm throwing spitballs out. One way.
Well, maybe one of the options is to sell now. The market's hot. Inventory's down. It's a primo location. I mean,
Sure.
that is an option.
Sure. I mean, that's always an option. But maybe they don't want to sell. They bought their home. They love it. This is the neighborhood they're in love with over here. They don't want to move on that end of it. So what are my options, right? My options are just to suck it up and deal with it. Or, is there a path forward? East High Street is a problem. It's always been a problem. Now it's going to be a problem multiplied multiple times over. And I know everybody shot down my one way, but is there an engineering?
Everyone shot down my gondola system too.
Yeah.
I know. What's wrong?
I thought they were both freaking awesome ideas, but what do I know?
love a gondola.
What do I know? But the point I'm trying to make is there an engineering solution? The developer found an engineering solution for this parcel to build on, so is there an engineering solution for East High Street? I don't know the answer to that, but I know people that are smart enough to understand that and do it. So is there, say, hey, Mr. Shimp, let's figure out, somebody hires him to figure out what an engineering solution might be.
I think it's bigger than an engineering solution.
It's a place to start.
Well, it's a place to start, but the real concerns that I'm hearing from neighbors about every development, and especially those that have been underserved by infrastructure spending.
Infrastructure.
It's all about infrastructure and traffic impacts.
So that's what I'm talking about.
But if you came up with a viable trolley system, or perhaps, here's an idea, what if we put kids on buses to get to school? It's just, those are viable solutions that help address what the concerns are.
I don't know. Mrs. Smith keeps on putting my job application in and that. I don't know
Well,
what
they
that
just
means.
raised bus driver pay 12%,
Yeah.
$21 an hour, Charlottesville
something
City for
about
school
getting a
bus
job.
drivers. The problem is,
So
if you have a CDL and you can drive a tractor trailer, you're getting paid 3x that.
So hey,
And there's a shortage of CDLs out there.
so I'm a commissioner on the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission. This is a regional thing. Maybe this is the body to engage and say, okay, give us solutions. When I say engineering solutions, I'm talking about what you're saying. Okay, do we reimagine East High Street? And okay,
Here's a solution from Kevin Yancey, King of Waynesboro. Kevin Yancey, you come up with solutions. You're a solutions-oriented guy. I like your creativity. Kevin Yancey says, good God, guys, comments. He says, create more crossing points north and south. Access 20 from Penn Park, access Pantops from Woolen Mills. Take the traffic away from this throttle or, what's the word?
Bottleneck.
Is it boondoggle? Would that apply there? Bottleneck?
Bottleneck.
Yeah.
Bottleneck.
So he's saying crossing points.
Right, and that's one of the things that is being discussed on the pedestrian side. It's interesting to me, running the North 29 corridor, how I'm starting to see traffic pick up on Berkmar Extended. Was really a ghost town for a while there, but we're starting to see traffic pick up utilizing those parallel road networks. He's on the mark with regard to how do you solve the problem, have more ways to get there.
yeah.
He calls it a choke point. That's a good call,
Yeah,
Yancey.
choke point.
King of Waynesboro, making the show better.
So the Regional Transit Partnership, I encourage folks to Google that. This is an opportunity to get involved in that end of it. Go ahead, Jerry, I'm sorry.
Stacy Reed, how did this get to this point without many folks in the community knowing? How does someone like Mr. Wood get this to come to fruition?
The property owner had zoned land. The land was zoned that way, but it had a restriction on it because of Federal Emergency Management Agency had a floodway that would prevented this to be developed. A developer came in and took the risk of having it surveyed on site. What had been done was a 30,000-foot survey, and they found errors in the calculations and adjusted the floodway. This created a opportunity
Buildable.
to develop the land. That's not a loophole. That is the way it works. And
By the way, that's a public process.
it's a public process.
Well,
It's not
how-
highly public. It's not
It's not,
advertised.
yeah.
It is a public process. If you are really, I can't tell you that I read a lot of public documents, and I can't remember the last time I read a FEMA map adjustment document, if it didn't come up for a special use permit or something else. But how did this happen so fast? Well,
Well, they didn't. So
1972, it was zoned for this.
Is
So-
this a byproduct of
Well, it didn't.
Charlottesville? I mean, Sean Tubbs, I see you're active on Facebook. Perhaps you're watching the show. We've given you numerous props on this program as the guy who broke this news
Oh,
and
no
put it in
doubt.
the news cycle. Sean, we've also said that people should follow, subscribe, contribute to community engagement Substack, Info CVille, and Town Crier Productions. Is this a byproduct of this area undoubtedly becoming a news desert?
No. This project, if we had 2 local newspapers and 2 weekly dailies,
They
would still not have known
Catch-
about this
wouldn't
project
catch that.
until the site plan process occurred.
Yeah.
And only because folks like Sean are tracking all of these things in the minutia is why it came forward.
But that was still after the fact, though.
But it was after the site plan meeting.
Correct.
But once it got on that agenda, it became a little more public.
Sure.
But the news desert is a real thing. We
Yeah.
miss the folks that were here.
Yeah.
We miss bustling newsrooms. And we just continually have to be thankful that we actually have a daily newspaper, because lots of communities our size do not.
So one of the reasons I love having Sir Neil on the show is because we can at least talk about these topics at a long format, hour and a half, whatever we end up talking today. So, maybe it's something that lands on our shoulders, Jerry, to stay a little, at least mine anyway, to stay a little bit more ahead of it and see if there's stuff that I know about that I can disclose out to folks so they can hear it. on that end of it. But again, to Neil's point, it was by right. The process started a year to year and a half ago. It's very minutia. I mean, you really need to know where you're looking to see this stuff. You got to track.
I mean, there's
FEMA.
and he has no reason to bring this up.
Who's he?
But let's say the landowner,
Okay.
the engineer, and the company that's going to develop the project.
Because they're in a due diligence phase.
It's to their advantage that this process has remained on the hush-hush.
But
But it
it's
doesn't
met every requirement.
Yeah.
Okay? But if this
We
had...
are an entitled society. Right now, people stand up for something that's by right. I'm allowed to build a house on my land, and people stand up and say, I can tell you what color it's going to be painted. Now, if you live in a gated community where you've agreed to such rules, that's fine.
Yeah.
But if I just own the land, that's a different story.
Interestingly, not all gated communities have housing aesthetic the same. Some allow creativity and nuance with their product.
They do.
Which is very nice. But
So-
I guess my comment is this. How would you characterize this in the baseball analogy? What inning are we in? Are we in the top of the 8th inning here?
We're past the 7th inning stretch.
Past
Right.
the 7th inning strength,
Yeah.
you've got the reliever coming in, and they've got a 5-run lead.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. So we're about to close this game. here.
And by the way, it's what, the Mets playing
Not
the
Mets.
Nationals right now.
Not the
Just-
Mets.
I got to bring them.
What was the top of the first inning? Would you have characterized? How do you characterize it? What year?
So let's assume.
The year 40, 30, whatever this happened. What was the top of the first inning?
Top of the first inning is when you do the survey.
Okay, so when was that?
That was probably 3 years ago.
Okay, so 3 years
So the
ago.
top of the first inning is when buyer A speaks to seller A, right, and starts the due diligence process. That's the top of the inning, which you're not going to find out about that. But, you've got a man on first. That's when the application for FEMA goes in. But
I feel like I'm in a Bud Cabot.
Yes.
Who's on first?
Who's on first? If this had gotten the attention it's getting now in the top of the
We would
first
be
inning,
same
would
spot
the-
we-
okay, that's my question.
We're in the same- we
Would
would be
the
in the same-
project have been different? That's what
absolutely
folks
not.
are asking here.
Absolutely
No.
not.
Okay.
No.
So you heard it from the experts right there.
Absolutely
If this
not.
had gotten the attention in the top of the first inning, we would still be in the same spot.
Because they're following the rules within the four corners of
There you go.
of the piece of paper.
That's what they're asking.
So the point I've been making is if you want to impact that, you've got to work on the rules on the four corners of the paper through the public process. This project is going to get done. Again, nobody's talking about the same number of units upriver that's getting built. It just happened to be built on top of an old junkyard, which was, maybe these folks are not so upset about it.
Yancey, for Neil, did Wood buy this land from Cosner?
I do not know the answer to that.
Keith, do you?
Yeah, I'd have to look in I had that information 24 hours ago. It didn't retain it.
Sean, if you're watching right now, do you know that answer?
Yeah.
Did Wendell Wood buy this from the Cosner family? Follow-up question. How many insurance flood claims have the Cosners filed in that area? Does anyone know that?
Yeah.
That I don't know, but I do have a fun statistic here somewhere that says, did you know?
I'm going to look up on the GIS on that.
Okay, yeah, that would be great.
A residential structure, this is on a national basis, a residential structure is 3 times as likely to experience a flood than a fire over the 30-year life of a mortgage. Within the past 5 years, every state in the United States has had a flood event, yet only 15% of Americans have flood insurance.
Yeah.
Those are good statistics.
That's great statistics. Great statistics. This comment, there is growing opposition by environmentalists. There will be wildlife displacement. Remember when the buzzards came to North Downtown during the development of Peter Jefferson Parkway?
And you're right, and it's zoned for development. And if you want it not zoned for development, that is the comp plan. And the comp plan would have to mandate that the property owner would be taking was green space. So the idea that this is habitat fragmentation, take a look at the comp plans of all the localities. They're filled with habitat fragmentation because that's what happens when you develop land.
And interestingly, I'll reiterate this again, the Piedmont Environmental Council has spoken out in favor of this project.
Yeah.
That's a big deal in my book on a project like this.
And that's not normal, by the way.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
It is and it isn't. Piedmont Environmental Council also weighed in favor of Biscuit Run. Oh, look how that turned out. But the idea behind it is to put dense development in the development area where services are rendered better. Oftentimes, if you are living in a development area or in the city, you're utilizing less carbon footprint because you're able to walk to things. Your drive is shorter if you're actually driving, and you're able to utilize public transit. Those are all things that are a net positive to the environment.
Southern Ventures Incorporated, which I'm assuming is the entity which this is owned it since 1981.
Wendell's owned it since 1981.
Yeah, under I'm looking at the
Under an
GA.
LLC.
Yeah,
Under
that's
an
an LLC in his holding company, United.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that answers the question.
Since
Wendell's had
1981.
this since 1981.
12/31/1981.
Dude's got vision, man.
Yeah.
Big time vision.
There was a shift around in 2016 internally in 3/23/2016, but it's still the same owner. They probably sold it internally or something along those lines.
Interesting.
And so you have owners that are purchasing land with vision, and you have city leaders that are looking at the next election.
That's right.
well,
Well
the
said. Dude,
the
give him props for that.
The market's always ahead of.
Well, in this particular locality, it seems to be substantially ahead.
I don't know.
Substantially ahead.
Neil works for a lot longer with all the jurisdictions around here. I've done it a fair amount of time. It seems to be pervasive throughout the jurisdictions. But
More
Is that a
comments
fair
coming in.
statement?
Here's a good one from Steven.
I think a fair statement is Fluvanna County, with their Pleasant Grove
Oh, yeah.
acquisition,
Absolutely.
preserved a huge amount of wildlife habitat, and it's the most underutilized park in the region.
So talk about bravery. I was part of that way back when. They bought that 1,000 acres for $1 million. It won by one vote.
Yep.
And was huge amount of opposition from the community about not buying it. And if you have,
And the reason not to buy it was?
they just didn't want to spend
the money.
Spend $1 million.
Steven says
We wouldn't have a new high school. We wouldn't. If you have not been out there, do yourself a favor. Take a ride out there. It's really gorgeous.
Steven says for Neil and Keith, how do both anticipate the Cosner family will respond? And to Jerry's point, Zanice, who owns Jack and Jill's, who is obviously at a very critical spot with the location of his business. I think the more critical spot is the Tubby's, right? Isn't Tubby's the one where the road splits right there on the X or the V? Isn't that Tubby's there? Jack and Jill, I'll look up the Google map.
Well,
'cause
I'm
on the
looking at the
opposite side, you
GIS
got
map
Blue
right
Ridge-
now.
You got Blue Ridge graphics on the other side of that intersection.
Yeah, so wouldn't the one that's really on the catbird seat, the one be at the V, where you can go down High Street toward downtown or left toward, like, what is that, Woolen Mills?
Tubby's is like that, but the other side, yeah, you'd want to look at the map. But yes.
Yeah, I'll look at the map.
That entire intersection is going to have interesting opportunities in the future.
They're sitting on gold.
Or sitting on the transportation solution that would make it better for everybody.
I mean, if anything, and this is just a layman's perspective, you guys are the experts. If anything, I would think those folks, Cosner really.
You should take a look at the pipe stem that it's going to be to get in and out of this property.
Well, the question they want to ask is, how are these guys going to respond? From my standpoint, you got a lot of leverage with the city, where like the city may have to go in there and start buying some of your property here.
So that entrance is going to be between Willow and Gray Street.
What do you do if we're spitballing for the sake of a talk show? What do you do if you're Cosner, the families that own these properties here? And you're right, Blue Ridge Graphics, I'm looking at the map, Neil. Blue Ridge Graphics is one, but the one that's really on there, remember the old camera shop?
Yep.
Richmond Camera was there, it's not there anymore. They got nicely remodeled. What do you do if you're these businesses here?
Right. And you own, if you own the property, what do you do?
Yeah.
And that's an interesting question, because
Camera center is what everyone's talking about. Thank you, Bill.
right, we've spent a lot of time talking about really this intersection and this corridor. The city is 10.2 square miles. There's a lot of needs in the city.
Sure.
And so where does this fit in the priorities?
Not to get over technical, but I'm looking at the GIS on this. East High Street is what they call a variable width right-of-way, and it varies from 100 feet down to 30 feet.
Yep.
What's that mean?
So that means as you drive down the road, the property that the city owns is going in and out. It's not like a consistent 50 feet the whole way up.
Which is the output from being an older city.
Correct.
If you go to Philadelphia, as Ray's going to see, that Philadelphia has streets that are very narrow because when Philadelphia was built, it was built on narrow streets.
Yeah.
These are back in vogue because they slow traffic down, but they also don't allow a lot of on-street parking. And so you're seeing a lot of parking decks having to go in order to support the level of density that Philadelphia, which is a city, has. We were talking with the folks from Greenville, and one of the people, I think was the executive director of the chamber, said, we have a world-class city, but we don't have world-class systems. I think that's pretty true of Charlottesville.
It sounds like Charlottesville.
Yeah.
That is Charlottesville.
So it's interesting. One of the
Bill says Cosner has been underwater, flooded multiple times. The viewers and listeners are so effing smart here. They're highlighting all the businesses along High Street right now.
So one of the interesting things is AT&T owns a switching station right there.
That's Verizon.
I'm just looking at who owns it on GIS. It's owned.
Looks like it's Charlottesville Glass and Mirror, Verizon Substation, Charlottesville Wrecker, Cosner's, Fabio's, Blue Ridge Graphics, Tubby's, La Michoacana, Jack and Jill's. The former Richmond Camera is the one that's on that X that we were talking about right there.
Right.
So does the city have to go in and start buying these properties?
Well, you got to have the cash, and what even if they had the cash, they don't have the land bank that's been created yet. What are they going to do with it?
They don't have a plan.
Yeah. So
that's the
worst
short
case.
version of
Okay, follow that up. Let's talk the other scenario. Capitalism and private scoops up these properties.
What if you...
Core and Capshaw. I'm just spitballing here. Wendell.
And what are they going to do with them?
I would suggest that someone with vision could come forward with a plan that would include all the properties and an opportunity for each property owner to have a viable business and a municipal greenway along the river that would create economic opportunity for all and would improve the traffic patterns. Now, that requires a lot more vision than 4 years.
Yeah. And a lot of money.
Yes.
And as I look at these, like most of these businesses, at least 3 of them, they're literally right up against the road.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they don't even have. I mean, there's a possibility.
You're talking setbacks?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you pull into Charlottesville Glass and Mirror, you got to be careful.
Yeah.
No doubt.
So there's just from
And there's a chemical company that sells cleaning solutions on that road?
Charlottesville Sanitary Supply.
That's right. Charlottesville Sanitary Supply?
Yeah, but that's on the opposite
That's on
side.
the other side.
That's on the other side.
Okay.
So if we're talking about from 250 to the Y, right? The Y where the old camera place was, there's 2 buildings that's really in play here. If I was looking at this thing from a development opportunity, there's 2 buildings in play that are of a concern. The rest of it is right-of-way acquisition, right? If we want to make that road wider, it's right-of-way acquisition. So that means you would buy right-of-way from the Cosners and so forth and so on. That means you got to relocate utilities. You know, it's an expensive project, but the hiccup is these 2, and I'm just looking on the GIS, so I don't have the actual building names on it, but there's 2 buildings there. Charlottesville Glass and Mirror is one of them, and the other one I don't know on GIS the name of it. I believe it used to be the old pie.
Oh yeah, the Pie Chest.
The old
that was
Pie
their
Chest.
distro center.
That's exactly right. So that's the 2 buildings that are right up against the right-of-way.
Not distro center, but what do you call it? Their kitchen, their commissary kitchen, I think is the phrase.
So you could, just putting my developer hat on, looking at this stretch, you could acquire right-of-way, remove utilities, rerun utilities, and widen the road.
Folks are saying East High Street starts in North Downtown and turns at 9th Street by Tarleton, Oak, and Lexington.
Yep.
That corner also has a site plan in place. I'm not going to be able to get to these many comments here. So I feel for these folks. I feel for these families. That is crammed with young families there.
Yes.
Crammed with young families.
So you taught me this not too long ago that we need to start being, honest,
Solutions-oriented.
solution-oriented, but we also have to be honest and straightforward with the listeners and the viewers. The reality of it is, short of an absolute implosion of multifamily and rental in the next 12 months, this project's going to get built. And there's going to be, it's not going to be pleasant on East High Street. That's the facts, right? Unfortunately, for the folks that are living there, and the folks that have to drive through the city. It's going to be a bloody mess.
I drive that way. I drive down Pantops, Freebridge, take a left on High to come to work. I now will be going left at Stone Robinson, backdooring it. Is that 53 by Carter's Mountain?
Yep.
I'll take it that way, or I'll come out to the right and then backdoor it by Boyd Tavern and hop on 64.
That's what I mean. You can do. Yeah, you can get on 64 and then hop on 20.
That's probably what I'm going to end up probably doing.
Those two solutions aren't really going to impact the neighborhoods.
No.
It's the people that are going to the businesses and then finding the back way through the neighborhood, past the kids trying to play in the street.
That's what it is.
That's what the challenge is.
Right. Yancey's saying Blue Ridge Graphics, the old camera shop, and Tubby's are about to become sacrificial lambs. He says even Fisher Auto Parts is going to be in jeopardy when this project starts. And he's doing that because, he's basically saying that because traffic is going to be such a cluster that folks, and this is his words, traffic is going to be such a cluster duck, quack, quack, that folks may not want to visit.
So
it's Yogi Berra. It gets so crowded, nobody comes there anymore.
It ain't over till it's over. But and maybe to play the opposite to it, that might impact the property owners around there if their businesses are sacrificing. Maybe they're more open to selling right away anyway.
Yeah.
But it depends on the business.
It depends on the business,
because
right?
a great deal of Charlottesville glass and mirror business is not drive up.
Right.
It is not.
And a great deal of the auto parts store is delivery, not drive up.
The Cotton family has owned that for as long as I've been here.
So it's important to recognize the businesses that locate in such corridors tend to have different needs than businesses that locate in different corridors.
Yeah. But
what's the advice you give to the businesses that are drive up? You got Riverside, you got Tubby's, you got Jack and Jill's, you got Fabio's, friends of the program, Fabio's. I believe those boys are watching the program right now.
Yeah.
Mike and Sazo.
If you want to have fun, sit at the at Charlottesville Glass and Mirror and watch the people challenged to make the left into Riverside Lunch. I mean, into the Riverside. It's bad now, and adding would it be 500 cars in that midday section, 500 trips is going to make it worse.
Yeah, and maybe there might be a short-term gain for Jack and Jill and Riverside from the construction folks buying lunch and stuff like that. But ultimately, it has to impact their bottom line.
Or they turn around. They no longer face the road, and they face the new development. That is one thing that I've seen happen. Is businesses turn around and they may change what they're.
But you got to have the carrying costs.
You did.
You have the carrying ability to carry business that long. Look, Jack and Jill.
Double Horseshoe Saloon is the little bar.
They all just came off of 2 years of COVID, right?
I mean, Jack and Jill's in a different spot. Zenise is doing quite well.
Yeah, and it's all cash.
Zenise is doing quite well. He owns Milan and the building that is Milan. He owns his Jack and Jill location free and clear.
Yeah.
Loves walking the loop in the neighborhood. He's doing all right.
Yeah,
but it doesn't matter if he's doing all right or not doing all right. How's the business?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he's motivated to sell right now. Even more so, because he's already thinking about it.
Yeah, or he shuts it down for a year or two and opens it back up again, right? He doesn't know anything on it.
Yeah, he doesn't.
He can go.
We're more mindful of the folks that are utilizing as like livelihood.
The folks that work there.
I'm not. Yeah. I'm looking at the business. I have, as the Free Enterprise Forum, we look at it as businesses. And what are we doing to support the businesses and the people?
So a tie-in on your tax
fair.
article on that end of it, that could impact the tax revenue.
It definitely could, and we saw a softness in the tax.
I read is that a white paper? Is that what it's called?
No, it's our
analysis
quarterly report of retail tax sales by locality. The reason it's interesting is it's by locality, where we show that Augusta is up and was the number one for being up for the first half of the year, and Albemarle, Charlottesville's number 2, Albemarle's number 3, but all of those numbers have to be taken into account with inflation. And so if you are not 9% or greater, if you accept that we have 9% inflation, which we may or may not because we don't have a local number for that, then you're negative. Greene County, which I think saw an improvement of 1.85%, is guaranteed to be actually negative comparatively when you consider inflation for retail and internet sales. But I think that what I want to get to, if we can, is the discussion that all of this is about change and positivity. We're growing. Where we're growing, how we're growing, change is hard. Change means you have to give up that which you know and believe in that you don't know.
So
Well said.
back to the folks that live in East High right now, right? Look, the reality of it is they bought there. Nobody knew that this was there, right? Nobody, this was a grass that people sunbathed on, right? Us geeks know because we can look at it and we know what's going on with
Anyone
that.
can look at it. It's public
I
record.
understand that, but if you don't know, you don't know, right? And these folks are busy taking care of lives and raising children, and they're not looking at that. And that's what it is. That what is
That's where a trusted advisor comes in.
that's
Always hire a trusted advisor. You're a trusted advisor. I'd say 90% of trusted advisors would not know about this.
I have to tell you, I did not know it until Sean picked it up.
And this dude is like, breathes this stuff.
I'm not as wired in as Sir Neil here, but I'm pretty darn wired in. And until Sean broke that, I didn't know that. And because of the same thing, I ride my bike along the path. Oh, this is really neat. You watch people sunbathe. I just never took the opportunity to look at it.
Wendell knew.
Wendell,
Well, and what happens is
he knew.
In one of these planning books, there's this great picture. Picture one has a new residents having a picnic in front of the sign, Phase 2 coming soon. Picture 2 is the new residents picketing Phase 2 approvals because they don't think it belongs there because they've got these great vistas. Well, Phase 2 was always going to go there. Monticello did the right thing when they bought Browns Mountain.
Oh, yeah.
That's buying the view shed, not dictating. They now control what they see. If you don't own it, you don't own it.
There you go. Well said.
I had this very conversation with my mother and father. God love them.
We saw that with, go ahead. I apologize.
No, it's okay. There was 2 vacant lots to the left and right of them at Lake Monticello, and there's houses getting built on there. And she goes, "Oh my God, they're building houses." And I said, "Mom, what did you expect them to do? They've been vacant lots. We could have bought them. You chose not to do that."
Right.
On that end of it, I don't want to be heartless to my mother, God forbid, on her 80th birthday party, but she was upset about it. And I said, "Mom, this is a reality of it, right?"
And you got to enjoy 20 some odd years of vacant lots next to you.
That's exactly right.
I have a friend who has a house up in Green Mountain Lake, and literally he bought the lot next to him because he got really used to having it be open.
Certain neighborhoods utilize their HOAs and the powers of economies of scale to buy land to keep it from getting developed, and evidently now it's turned into a horse stable. I won't
See?
say which neighborhood that is, but
Yes.
I've seen that happen firsthand.
There you
And
go.
I've seen neighborhoods join together and fight interconnectivity, and those become little football fields. Isn't it great the developer thought to leave that open for the kids to play?
So what I will commit to everybody who's watching and listening, and the folks at this table, I'll keep on digging into solutions, talking to the engineers that I know, at least that willing to talk to me about what could be the solutions for East. It's nothing will be formal, nothing official, but at least we can share some potential options.
Spencer says, and this is a good way to close at 11:37 here. Fantastic show, gentlemen. We live in the neighborhood, and the sad truth is this has been going on right under our nose, and no one knew.
Yeah.
He follows up with this. Please look into what else Mr. Wood owns in our neighborhood and what it could also turn into.
I would encourage you not to exclude that caveat. Look into everything that's going on, not just what Mr. Wood owns,
That's exactly
because everything can change. And look at what it's zoned, and look at what it's dictated in the comp plan for. These are the details that you really, as a regular resident, you don't look at, but you should, because it's how the community sees itself growing. And I would not put it on one person's ownership or anyone else's ownership. Look at everything and see what it could be. And remember, if you have a willing property owner, they can rezone their land according to the comp plan.
So I'll add a real life story to that. I'm helping a client buy some land in Albemarle County, and the adjoining property to it, I was asked, can that ever be developed? And I said the answer is yes. anything that's surrounding your property eventually could be developed. Will it be developed? Will it not be developed? And I said, let's pull up on the phone. Let's find out what it's rezoned. Let's find out what the by right use is and all that kind of great stuff. And they actually made a decision not to, because it was actually, I think, developable property, and we moved on to something else. So the answer is everything around you that's vacant, as far as land is concerned.
A really great microcosm of this is that Peter Jefferson Parkway place, where you have all those medical offices around Peter Jefferson, and that one house that is right in the middle. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
You got the pond, you got all massive development, but there's one home that did not sell out to developers.
Right. And you could say that property owner has rights, and that property owner chose not to exercise and sell those rights, and they still have rights.
That's true. It's very well said. The show is dynamite.
I love it when Sir Neil comes on.
Yeah, I mean, dynamite. It was fun.
He makes me smarter.
No doubt. Please support the Free Enterprise Forum. I will say it again, the Free Enterprise Forum. You see how good this man is and the value he provides to this community. Support the Free Enterprise Forum. Keith Smith.
Support Sean Tubbs,
And
right?
Sean Tubbs. I mean,
Because-
he's been active throughout the whole show. I would
Yeah,
imagine he's
because
watching here.
we would not be having this
We
conversation.
love you, Sean. Sean Tubbs, you put this in the news cycle. Sean Tubbs.
And I would have not took a deeper dive into it if it wasn't for Sean.
And Hall Spencer would not have written the article in the Daily Progress if
Absolutely.
not what Sean Tubbs had done. Sean Tubbs, you're an institution locally. Judah Wickhauer is the director. This is Real Talk with Keith Smith. All stories archived on realtalkwithkeithsmith.com. Real Talk with Keith Smith, presented by Yes Realty Partners. The I Love CVille show is up in approximately 49 minutes.
Yep.
49 minutes. Get ready, Judah. Thank you kindly for joining us. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Sir Neil, thank you, sir.
That was awesome.
I really hope that J-Dubs gets called an institution.
Yeah.